It's Tuesday, January 24th, 2023 at 7:04 PM. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Polly,
Here?
Rose,
Here.
Carl. Here. Hitzke.
Here.
Gallegos.
Here.
Pelletier.
Here.
And Fingerhut here.
Do we have anyone here present this evening who wishes to address the board? Is there anyone watching? Okay. Is there anyone online that would like to address the board? If so, please click the raise hand icon on the bottom of the screen. Okay, seeing none, we will move on to next item is the Board of Education comments. Anyone have anything this evening?
Newsies is Saturday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I sent out the link to everybody. If you didn't already buy tickets or interested in going, they added the Thursday night show this year. So there's Thursday and Friday, 2 on Saturday and 1 on Sunday. So come join. I know they did the little tour this week and they were supposed to come to the district office, but it got double booked. So, but they posted pictures and there's a little preview and everything out there. So come support them. All kids.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comment they'd like to make?
Okay, tonight I'm gonna read the code of conduct at the start of the meeting today.
Okay, excellent. All right, any other comments? Why don't you do that right now?
Okay. We're on code number 7. Code number 7 says, I will prepare for, attend, and actively participate in school board meetings. The author goes on to say, this means that if you didn't have time to study your board packet ahead of time, say so. Don't fake preparation. Try hard to allow enough time to do your homework. The best board members read, study, and call ahead with questions, giving the superintendent time to explain or research the question. I just wanted to give a little reminder then and just remind us all that the Google Doc is there if you do have questions ahead of time, so make sure you utilize that. And, mention reaching out to the superintendent with questions too. Dr. Myers is always very prompt, so if you do have any, questions, make sure you just reach out. And then also a reminder, just use the Friday updates, because if you're staying up to date with those, it just helps you be more prepared for the board meetings and helps you get through that board packet. So that's all I got.
Okay. All right, before we move on to the next item, Eric, I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that shirt you have on tonight.
Got my Special Olympics shirt on, yeah.
And why would you be wearing that tonight,
I
Eric?
just came from our Special Olympics students for staff game at the high school. That's our end of the season celebration every year. We had a huge turnout of about 21 staff members that participated and 22 athletes that participated. Some of those athletes are on one of our competition teams that won the regional championship last weekend and are headed down to state at ISU in March.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Okay, next is the District 75 reports, and first up is the business office.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk with you tonight regarding our bonds. The next part of our process regarding our bond issuance is the actual execution and distribution of the funds. In order to do that, we have to have specific paperwork signed in a timely manner. So tonight we're asking the board to pass what's called a parameters resolution. Basically, it sets parameters by which we can execute. If we are operating outside those parameters, we cannot execute the bond documents. So tonight we're requesting that in addition to being allowed to issue $4.5 million worth of bonds, our 3 delegates who will be signers are Kevin Hawley, Christy Fingerhut, and myself. Do you have any questions?
Have you heard anything about what interest rates and things are looking like?
I got an update from Eric, and actually there is a small update included in your board report as well, but most recently it sounds like about 3.25 is the rate that we're looking at, but again, that can change. But that's what we're looking at currently.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Next up is the report from teaching and learning.
Good evening. I'm Jill Unger, Teaching and Learning Coordinator for Literacy and Social Studies. And tonight I am going to explain to you how District 75 is preparing to host the District 120 Aspire Education Academy interns. I'm very excited to share this with you tonight because previously the focus of the presentations on everything we were doing to set up our program. But tonight, it's all about how District 75 is now part of the action. So the Aspire Education Academy is a course pathway for students that are interested in becoming future educators. They have 2 years of coursework where they will earn early college credit. And they also take part in an authentic internship or a student teaching like experience as a capstone of the program. And this program was developed between District 75 and 120 in a response to the general shortage of teachers in the field of education, a need for more bilingual educators who can communicate with all of our families. And we realized that we had amazing strength with our community and our Mundelein community and our education community, and we could really capitalize on what we already have. So the Aspire internship will take place with high school internships visiting District 75 3 days per week on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. For about 90 minutes per visit. The other 2 weeks, the high school students will be back at Mundelein High School learning job readiness skills in their classrooms in the high school. There will be 4 rotations that they'll get to experience over the course of 1 year. So the 4 rotations will be 6 weeks each, and we've set up 3 mandatory rotations. So students will experience Washington, Mechanics Grove, and Carl Sandburg, but then they'll also have a choice rotation where they might go to Lincoln and work with pre-K students, do some work at the high school, and explore other fields of education as well. This is a list of some possible activities that the interns may take part in when they're working in our schools. And in order to be a cooperative teacher in District 75, our teachers just needed to have 3 years of teaching experience. They do not need to be tenured, which is different sometimes from an actual student teaching experience when you're working with colleges and universities. But we are also going to be careful not to pair any siblings, parents, or relatives with our high school students. And the final approval over the matches will take place with the building principals. So some benefits of being a cooperative teacher are influencing the future educators in our district. We'll have additional manpower in our classrooms. Teachers can earn CPDUs, which are professional development hours for hosting interns, and they will have pride in building and strengthening our community ties. I really think for our District 75 teachers, it's going to be refreshing and inspiring to view education through the perspective of someone just beginning their journey in education. It's very exciting to see it through the eyes of just someone so new and excited to be in the field. And on top of that, I think it'll be wonderful role models for our students to see these high school students working with them and interested in what they do and what they're learning. So in January, we presented this program to Dr. Kroll and I presented this program to the District 75 staff, and teachers completed a interest survey, and over 30 teachers from District 75 have expressed interest in hosting the future interns. So we're so excited. It was such a fun way to kick off our January 9th Institute Day. So many nodding heads, smiling faces, and people so excited to embark on this program. So it was a really great way to start off the new year together. And on February 17th, we're going to be following up with any teachers that expressed interest with a question and answer time. We have another Institute Day coming up, so we're just going to be using some of that time to make sure that any questions going into this program are answered. And then at the start of the school year, once we've made the matches and know exactly who will be working with who and who's actually going to be hosting an intern, we're going to host an orientation meeting so that we can make everything as smooth as possible for the students and the teachers. And that's it. Are there any questions?
Couple
Okay.
of the 30 or so teachers that signed up, what's the breakout as to grade level that those teachers are coming from? Do you know,
How many each grade?
like how
level?
many from Washington, how many from Mechanics Grove, how many?
So I would have to get back to you with that data. I know that we have somebody from just looking at the survey as the information is coming in. I did a count of how many. But I did see that there's people from every building and every area. I just don't have a clear count on how many that I can get back to you.
Just curious.
Because of the rotations, it's designed to utilize all aspects of the district, right? Because of the 3 different rotations and then the
Yeah.
choice ones, so it kind of ensures that you have.
Have you had students signing up already, or when do they sign up, and how many are interested?
So right now in the high school, there's about 30 students that are enrolled in the program. And 12 of those students, I believe, excuse me, I think it comes down to 7 of them are seniors and will be part of the internship next year. But the way it works out then is that there's 4, they each have 4 different experiences throughout a year. So we had to make sure that we could, provide at least the 28 sections for them. And on the survey, teachers were offered to say if they would like to participate for just 1 rotation, 2 rotations, 3 or 4. So we have more than enough teachers interested in order to support our students.
I think it would be nice next year. As you got halfway through the school year, to maybe come and give us an idea as to how it's going and how the teachers are reacting, how the students are reacting.
I would love to do that.
My only comment is I think this is a really great program and I'm really excited and I like how it's all set up and I think that it's kind of unique. And
Yeah,
I think that it's neat that we're able to partner not only with the high school, but then, to try to help both parts out and then hopefully help the district by eventually getting
Yeah.
Teachers out of it. So I think it's really neat.
Thank you.
The fact that we have 30 teachers interested in doing this too, I think is really incredible. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm very proud of our district and this whole project. So
Good.
thank you.
great.
Thanks, Joe. There, you're gonna go summer school coordinator, site leader.
Their definitions.
Hello. So tonight I have a MOU for you, which is not necessarily what we anticipated when we finished the contract last spring, but we knew that there might be some things that came up, and so this is one of those. When we agreed last year to have the summer school coordinator and the summer school site supervisor or site leader, it really roughly translated to a summer school principal and summer school assistant principal so that they could be the leaders of that program for the summer, which was a nice opportunity for teachers within our district to have additional leadership opportunities that they may not have as the actual building principal, but to give them that experience to decide if they wanted to move into that leadership role in the future.
We made the recommendations for those stipends based on the amount of hours of pre-planning and the amount of hours of the summer school program specifically. And took the $45 an hour rate, which the teachers were getting to teach during the summer school program. And so that worked out wonderfully last summer, because we were still functioning under that CBA. This year, now we're under the new collective bargaining agreement, and our teachers are receiving $50 an hour to teach summer school. Which then, in reflecting on the leadership stipends, we realized that the leadership stipends was still based on the previous summer school leader rate. And so I am asking the board to consider moving forward with updating the summer school coordinator and site leader rate to be then moved to that higher rate of $50 an hour rather than the 45, so that they maintain their comparable salary position for that leadership role. Does that make sense? So I'm saying it out loud. In my head, it made sense.
Are you saying that otherwise we'd be underpaying the leadership person less than what the teachers are making? So what would incentivize them to take on a leadership role if they're gonna be paid more as a teacher?
That's exactly it. Yes, thank you for streamlining that much more effectively than I did. Do you, any questions about this?
I think we're good.
Okay, great. Thank you so much
Thank you,
for
Sarah.
talking me through that.
Make sure I understood it too.
Going to human resources. Yes. Next up is human resources.
Good evening, everybody.
Okay.
It'd probably take me longer to walk up here than it is for me to talk. For your review and hopeful agreement later tonight, I have an intergovernmental agreement for you between Fremont and District 75. This intergovernmental agreement supports our students from the Ukrainian and Russian speaking communities within Mundelein. Currently, District 75 has a substitute employee that works 4 days a week for the district to serve those students. Fremont needs somebody that has those similar skills, but they only need them for 1 day a week. That equals 5. And so this benefits both our district and Fremont. Thank you.
Thank you, Shane. Superintendent's report is next.
I'm excited tonight because we get to hear follow-up on our sleep study survey. So this was a process that began, it seemed almost 2 years ago, when we were first doing some initial surveys, kind of find out what some of the feedback was from our community and our staff. And we did follow up this past November. So this evening, what we do have is the follow-up in regards to getting more of that data. So it gives us some comparison of what we can do with that. What I would say is from a board's lens and from an administrative lens, it's a data point for us to be able to kind of see what may have changed during that time, which we know there'd be some changes. And then really for us to kind of decide, is there anything that we could do in regards to that, that may be able to improve some scenarios? And also decide how much of a change is needed between the two. Meaning, does things stay the same, or do we need to make that move? And I'm saying that because we know we made that initial adjustment with the class times. There's not a lot of flexibility we have, but I think what this does, it does bring to light to us some issues that our families are facing and that we can try to address them. While also still being able to hear, there are some families also that do really see the benefits of what has taken place with some of the scheduling changes. And I think being able to have the partnership that we do with Rush really helps aid us in that process, because I know we just been talking with Nicole on the phone of how hard her and her team are working to break down the data, because there's a ton that I really appreciate getting those summary sheets. When I see them, I'm like, oh boy, this is perfect. And just listening to Nicole be able to go through it, I mean, there's a lot there. So there's two parts. I know one, we were able to send you earlier in the week. The sheet that you had in advance really broke out Mechanics Grove, Carl Sandburg, and then the high school. And then tonight, Nicole's able to provide you the summary, which more of the focus is on Washington. So I do believe more of our talk is gonna be around Washington, because that is the school that did probably have the biggest change with starting earlier with our younger students. So with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Dr. Russo Passaran and colleague.
I'm Sarah Van Welken.
Sarah, okay, gonna be there, so.
Thank you. So thank you to the board and thank you also to the families in the district for participating in the survey collection. I wanted to just let you guys know there was a slight change in our team. Dr. Nika Winarski is no longer at Rush, but we have been partnering now with Dr. John Adams, who is a data scientist from Olivet University. So he has been providing us with a lot of our analyses that we'll be presenting here today. And then our sleep expert, Dr. Stephanie Crowley, she could not be here today, but she has also consulted with us on these data. Next slide, please. So this just gives you an overview snapshot of how many families and students data that we have. And as I'm looking at it, I apologize, I did not indicate how many families are in these numbers. This is how many individual students we have data for. So each parent is asked to fill out the survey. There's a parent portion or kind of family comprehensive section, and then a section that is dedicated to each child within the family, so that if a family has more than one child across different schools, we can gather all of that data. So while the response rate is still a little underwhelming for the number of students that are in the district, it was nice to see that we had a pretty good correspondence with the number of students data that we had from last year, because there were 212 families who responded to both surveys. We were also able to look at linked data from families who completed the survey twice. So I will give you some snapshots of those results as we talk through some of the other data. Next slide, please. So kind of the broad overview of the pre-change and post-change across the different upper level and lower level schools. The data, or not the data, but the research really supports the later start for middle school and high school students. And what we found was that was definitely true in our district. If you're looking at sleep as your primary metric, the change to a later start time was very supportive of our high school and middle school students. More kids were sleeping at least 9 hours. They were able to wake up later. They were easier to wake up in the morning, so they needed less of the parent nudging them time to get out of bed. And there was less conflict between parent and child in the morning. Teachers reported an increased focus and attention of the students. In the parent comments, we did have many commenting that it was just a needed change, a welcome change. There were definitely a few families who felt there wasn't a need to go later, but the overwhelming majority of middle school and high school parents really felt that this later start time was beneficial to them. I would say, I know we're not diving deep into the middle school families. There was some commentary about how when the start time is later and some of the parents start later, if there was something that went wrong with a bus or some other change, the parent may be out of the house by the time they realize that some extra support is needed for their child. But generally the families were very happy with that. And there was also some commentary around, you know, maybe there's just more time for the kids to quote get in trouble with the extra time. But again, I think the benefits of the later start time outweigh the negative components that some parents had highlighted. I do have all of the individual comments from parents available. I think we might have provided some of that to you already. If you want additional data, I can get that to you as well. And then with the, oh, not yet, sorry. So with the elementary students, the early elementary and late elementary, it's a little bit of more of a mixed picture that we're going to dig into deeper. I did want to stress though that across levels, the teacher data, so we collected also teacher report, and teacher report was both with regard to the students that they see, and it was also support staff and other personnel in the schools. But it was also some items around the teachers themselves and their wellness and how the schedule worked for them. The data with respect to the students largely reflected what we heard as well from the parent surveys about the students. What I will comment, and I don't know if this is something you would be interested in having a follow-up presentation on,
But the teacher survey did also kind of identify some issues that the teachers may have with the start times and just their day in general. The biggest commentary was around having enough time for planning and collaboration with the other staff in the school. And for the Washington and elementary student teachers, they were commenting that with the early start time, having any kind of prep time for their school day is obviously more restricted. The high school and middle school parents, or not parents, teachers, they felt that the extra time in the morning was beneficial to them, although there were some teachers, and I'm not sure what the contracted time is for the teacher start time, but some of them felt that they still had to get to the school at a really early time, and so that created a new barrier for them. So there are some mixed reports from the teachers, but that is not the focus of today, so we will keep moving. Next slide, please. And the overall perspectives from families who had children only in District 120, it was again largely positive and low percentage of negative response. And this was in response to a question that was basically overall, has your experience with this change been somewhat positive, neutral, somewhat neutral, or negative and very negative. So kind of across that domain, you'll see that the families who only have kids in District 75 were the ones who had the highest percentage of negative experiences with the time change, although there are still many families that thought the time change was beneficial to them. And then families who cross over, not surprising, are kind of mixed, but with a slight lean towards positive. I don't have the exact number of how many students were in high school versus elementary to break that down for you right now, but I don't think this is very surprising. I think this might have been expected by just knowing what the times were. Shift, please. And then we also asked them a general question about whether there was any change in the financial burden with the start times. We did see a decreased use in before care services, but presumably there was also, while it wasn't a significant increase, there were additional families needing longer care after school, which I think is probably what's leading to our slight increase in financial burden for the D75 families. That is not explicit in the survey, so that's just my added commentary. But as you will see, to large effect, families did not incur additional financial burden with the time change. Next slide. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit already. The upper level students, so looking from grades 6 through 12, they did on average see a significant increase of 26 minutes of sleep in a year in the second year of the study, so post change, and that was statistically significant. And they also, again, fewer students required parents to help wake them up. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about a sleep gap. So when you have students sleep X amount of hours during the week, and then how much do they sleep on the weekend? And then you calculate that difference, that tells you kind of what their weekend catch up is and whether they are having a sleep restriction during the week and then recovery on the weekends. That had a significant decrease for the middle school and high school students. In the lower level students, so up to 5th grade, they were losing sleep, approximately 18 to 20 minutes of sleep. And they will look at some charts in a minute, but they had a greater need to have kind of extra support waking up in the morning. And their sleep gap was significantly increased, especially when you looked at the paired families. A couple of caveats, I'll talk about other caveats later, but right now I want to just remind people that the survey was administered in October, and that was before the time change, before things got dark. We did hear from families after the survey had gone out that had they completed it perhaps in the winter time, they might have had a different response to some of the items on the survey. So that's one thing to keep in mind when we're talking about these data.
We did a reference what kind of a different response, was it an impact because it was darker
Yes.
earlier?
So they said that they might have been more positive when they filled it out in October, but given that it was harder to wake the child when it was now darker out, that it's been more of a struggle. And so that shift is something that isn't captured as much on the survey. So I just wanted to make sure that we noted that.
Correct.
Next slide, please. So this is just a kind of a frame of reference for you. I know I'm going to focus a lot on sleep,
but I'm also gonna focus also on social and emotional. But from the perspective of how much sleep should the kids be getting, we have, I think you can still hear me if I move over here. So your kindergartners are gonna be 5 and 6 years old. Ideally, they're really in the 10 to 12 hour range. 9 hours is kind of an accepted minimum for that. And just to orient you, the red is consensus among experts in the field that that's an inappropriate amount of sleep for that age range. The yellow, there's either inconsistency, disagreement, or uncertainty around the benefits or risks of that amount of sleep, and then green is the target areas. So when we're talking about Washington School, you have kindergarten to 2nd grade. Again, if you have 9 hours of sleep, that would be kind of your minimum that you would want to be targeting. And again, up to 12 or 13 hours is good. You get more into the 8 to 10 range, as you go up to the middle school and high school students. Anyone have a question about that before we move on?
So does that circle represent the band of the data that you had for people then? Or you're just, or is that the ideal?
That represents kind of where we're targeting. So when I talk about some of the data, I'll give you a reference point of around 9 or 10 hours. And that's just kind of resetting for you and keeping in mind too that there is no guidance right now on what time the elementary school students should start. So what we're trying to work backwards from how much sleep do they need and how much sleep are they getting? Next slide, please.
Can I ask you a question? I'm kind of backing up a little bit. So you referenced the survey results from the parents. So looking at what those comments were, and then the 2 charts you showed with percentages, and do you think they match?
Yes, and I'm gonna give you more details about the parents' comments for Washington in particular. But yes, I think it makes sense why the ratings were more disagreement about the time change based on the comments that they give. I think we should also keep in mind that the parents who responded to the survey both years represent a unique sample because they were very attuned to the change happening and likely motivated to adjust to that change. And so that biases the data in one way. And then you also have families that may be responding to the survey because they felt very strongly positively or very strongly negatively about it. So we are only capturing kind of the loudest voices in the district, but in the absence of other data, that's what we have. So, but yes, we will kind of tie together their impressions of the time changes with their specific comments as we move forward.
As I just wanted to note, as a parent who filled them out both times with 3 kids and across 2 districts, so I definitely hit a lot of the pieces there. When I filled it out, I did it on September 30th, and as I did it, I took notes and sent them to Dr. Myers because I noted a few things, so that's why I was going back to scan because I didn't quite remember what my notes were, but I felt like there were some parts where I felt like the results would be skewed by the fact that some of the questions did not have a non-applicable option to answer and would not let you proceed without answering the question.
So you may have been one of the early ones taking the survey. I did get that feedback and we did go back in and update the survey to make sure that those were corrected.
Okay.
I think there was a very small sample of people who ran into that issue.
Okay,
But we
well, that's
definitely
good to know,
appreciate
because
that.
I was frustrated, because there were some things where it said,
Yeah.
are you financially impacted? Like, I couldn't say, I don't remember if you have, but there were a couple where I wanted to answer, and I wanted to say, well, this doesn't apply to me, but if I have to pick an answer, that's gonna look either really good or really bad, but doesn't really, so that's good to know.
And I will say, I think moving forward, we could think about it's a very long survey. We all recognize that. If there are just certain high impact items that we want to focus on, or are there, I think a combination perhaps of higher impact items and maybe more on the social emotional side. And the drawbacks to that is you won't have that longitudinal data as you move forward. But if we can encourage more people to respond by having a shorter survey, that is always that could be helpful as well. So I think feedback on things that physically worked and didn't work with the survey are useful. Questions that may have been ambiguous, let us have that information as well.
Well, and so I imagine since because I gave a few other comments, so he probably picked like one, it just said in Guno, and I was like, well, that's not
Right.
defined, and that probably was just a language, so I'm glad that probably got fixed
Yeah.
then based on what you're saying too.
Yeah.
And then, trying to think through, oh, and then when it was sent out, it was asking about the last 7 days. Well, the last 7 days at that point had encompassed Rosh Hashanah, so
Okay.
my kids were out 2 days, but not because they missed sleep or something
Right,
else. It
right.
happened to be, a legitimate issue. So I answered it based on an average week rather than that particular week, but given the way that it was asked and it said the last 7 days, that
Sure.
was again, I think there were just a lot of things where I was kind of scared, where I was thinking, well, should I even finish
And-
this? Because I don't want to skew it one way or the other, but I didn't think it was.
I will
So-
say, so many of the items that were used in our survey were from Lisa Meltzer's survey that she used in the study in Denver. And so some of it, we didn't want to change the wording on it
That makes
because it
sense.
already been validated and used.
Sure.
But you did the right thing. So usually with different surveys or measures that you fill out, if the last 7 days were not representative, then you should just assume a representative week.
And I did put, because I appreciated, there was at least a thing at the end that said, do you have any comments? And I put those in there so that, and I'm glad to hear that you took that, or somebody
Yeah.
took that feedback and did that, because then it makes me feel better about the results after that, if what you're saying is true. So I appreciate hearing that.
And then another caveat is just to think about other surveys that the school sends out. I don't know what the response rates are on that, but I think, whether or not the families that do respond feel they're being heard is going to encourage people to respond in the future. Thank you. So with sleep health, there's a lot of focus on the optimal hours of sleep, and obviously even this is presented with that bend to it. However, there's also sleep quality, sleep timing, and other aspects of sleep. Quality is something that we aren't getting at per se in the district-wide survey. We have an add-on study that we do in the spring. Unfortunately, it only has 12 elementary students in it, but it's a data set of 12 that will have actigraph data, where we can look at how many times they're waking in the night to see if their sleep was actually restful or if they are sleeping through. So quality is something that needs to be addressed in some way. And then the timing of the sleep and thinking of circadian rhythms is very important here, because it's also your body's regular cycle. So physiologically, we kind of go in 24-hour cycles. And so it could be that they're getting the right quantity of sleep, but because their body isn't really ready to fall asleep yet, or they're a morning person or an evening person, that kind of shifts their own personal rhythms. And so one of the things to keep in mind, and we'll talk about again as we go through, is that circadian timing may still be off in the younger kids who are starting very early, because we see they're getting at least the recommended minimum of sleep, but they're still feeling tired or fatigued. So I'm probably going over time, so we should keep moving and talk about this a little more as we go through. Next slide, please. So you may remember we had a figure like this last year. To orient you, we have the kids come home from school. In Washington, the majority of kids were coming home between 4 and 6 p.m. They go to school early, right? So there are some students who get picked up by the bus at 7 a.m. And then school starts at 7:50. So they get home and they have their home routine, which is dinner, possibly homework in the older grades, not necessarily kindergarten. Whatever their bedtime routine consists of, and we always stress a good bedtime routine. They go to sleep on average, it was at 8:20, and this is again, Washington families, it varied from 6:30 to 10:30 at night. So you have some families, on either end of that average that will not have this be their sleep pattern. So the average duration was 10.2 hours. And then they were waking up anywhere from 5:45 to, I believe, 7:15. The average wake time was around 6:30. The school starts, I'm sorry, I have 7:45, it should say 7:50. Last year it was starting at 8:45. So you have from 6:30 to whatever time you leave your house in the morning, which is something I wish we would have worded a little differently on the survey. to wake up and eat breakfast, get out the door. So this is where I want to reference some of the parent comments. While their child may be getting enough sleep, the issues are that they are having difficulty waking up. So they are getting woken up by their parent. They may be really not motivated to wake up, challenging that they need to get up. The parent is stressed because they know that they need to get them ready, so they have time to eat, so they can get to the bus or get out the door to get to school on time. And that's causing that parent-child conflict that the high school parents were happy to say has gone away, is now introduced in the elementary students. So we also have, although it's not a significant increase, I'll show you an increase in the number of kids who are eating on the go or skipping breakfast in the morning. So now they are in a kind of stressed mood going into their school day, not well fed, starting school. We have teacher report that we'll talk about. And then they get home and their parents are actually very good at getting them to bed on time, but the parents are stressed on that side too. They're rushing to get home from work, pick up the kids, dinner. Many parents have commented that the evening routine has been disrupted where they don't have time to read with their child at night. And that, you know, that bonding time is gone. They're not doing things in the community in the evening. They may still have after school activities, but the school activities that happen in the evening, the families commented that that's not something they'll participate in as much because they want to get their kids to bed. So they also struggle to get the child perhaps into the kind of restful state of mind to go to bed. The children are falling asleep very quickly, so they're ready for sleep by the end of the day. But it's been kind of a stressful day. And so that is something that the parents have brought up, where when you think about the social emotional side of this, there's conflict. And then when we talk about the circadian rhythms, since you're having to physically wake your child up, their body isn't quite ready to start the day. So their rhythms are out of sync for where it should be. And again, some of the changes, we've been looking at significant changes. We look at things like effect sizes. We look at clinical significance or statistical significance and also practical significance. So it's been interesting to decipher all of the data and to present you the right story, because from some perspectives, things, you know, they may be trending in a certain direction, but maybe it's not significantly different. But you have parents commenting on the significance of it in their lives. And so it has practical significance. Let's keep going. Next slide, please.
We could real quick, just for me and understanding the importance of what you said, those important areas, context wise, because we're summarizing the feedback that we've had from parents. And this is my linear mind thinking. So we've referenced that we've had 149 students at Washington whose families participated. So when we're summarizing, is that connecting to the basis that we had a 46% negative impact? That's who's responding to what that description was, how it's impacting their children is a takeaway.
Yeah, so I didn't, you know, do a one-to-one match to count how many people had negative comments and, you know, but yes, I think that is where the negativity comes in. I think the other part is I'm trying to think of the timing of activity. I think it's just kind of, again, like a lot of things are bunched up in a very short amount of time with the child, because parents are aware that they need to get their child to bed. So if you have after school activities, if you have sports, you know, the time to just stop and regroup, they've kind of lost that window.
Another question.
Mhm.
So when you're talking about circadian rhythms and what this time, the sleep time is, would you not agree that that sleep issue is periodically gonna come as the clock moves across?
So it can cause the disruption during the day, and I have slides later on kind of giving feedback from the parents, and so, or not parents, the teachers. But yeah, so what have been commented on qualitatively are that the children are either more argumentative with their parent, or they are crying more frequently, and then they have less focus and less attention. And you know, the research shows that, you know, even an hour can really make things better and help with cognitive performance and behavior. And some kids when they're overtired, they're gonna be more jumpy. Other kids, when they're overtired, they're gonna fall asleep on the bus, which was also commented. So you have a lot of different factors going on, but you kind of get this trickle down effect downstream throughout the day, showing that it just hasn't aligned right. And one thing, you know, I spoke with Dr. Crowley about this is, well, can we change it? Can we fix it? Like, when you think we're in the middle of winter now, it's probably not going to get better right away. One of the things that she was talking about was the morning light is really important, obviously. And so whatever you can do to increase the amount of light exposure to the child at the start of the day will help their circadian rhythms kind of reset a little bit. Now, I'm not suggesting everyone get a light for their house, but it's a piece of the puzzle. And honestly, the sleep aspect, she was more optimistic about it. So she said, you know, they are at least getting the right amount of sleep, and there are some signs of fatigue, but the amount of the sleep gap for them, maybe they're sleeping an extra 20 minutes on the weekend. That means it's not a, you know, significantly drastic sleep restriction during the week. So she felt there were some signs that it's, you know, it hasn't been impacting them in a truly negative way. And so I think it's important to kind of balance the sleep perspective with the family's perspective, and you'll see kind of where I come to in the end.
Can you refresh our memory or refresh us to when was the period that this was open to take? I know I took it September 30th, but I don't know when everyone else took
Yeah,
it.
so it was open until the end of October, and I did check with Sarah that we did the survey approximately the same time last year. It was October into November.
'Cause my only thought was, with this new change, like the date that I took it, that was only about a month, you know, a
Yes.
little over a month into school, so. I would expect those loudest voices to be loudest at that point, because it's still new and no one likes change. But
I
I
will
don't know
say,
if that impacts that. or
one of the
not.
benefits of the earlier start time is that parents who do start earlier, they could get to their meetings earlier, you know, on time in the morning. And there was a significant reduction in the before care use. So that's the other side of it, that, you know, my child's at school before 8 o'clock, and now the parent can start their day. The issue is that not all of the parents, as was noted in the survey, they said, while I started my day earlier, that was great. I didn't actually end my day earlier, so it was still a long afternoon. So this, I kind of said some of the stuff already, so we can go through it a little more quickly. This is just reminding us that the pre-change versus post-change, we had, again, a slight downward shift in Washington families, where we went from 66% of families getting more than, or students, I'm sorry, 66% of the students getting more than 10 hours of sleep to 57%. And that has kind of meshed into the kids that get between 9 and 10 hours of sleep, which is, it was 30%, it's now 36%. And the 9 hours of less group increased from 4% of the sample to 7% of the sample. So, you know, we still have, you know, if we use 9 hours as kind of the minimum amount of sleep that they should be getting, you're still capturing a very large percentage, over 90% of the students. We're still getting at least 9 hours. Okay, next slide. This is not unexpected, but since we start school earlier, we are now waking up earlier, and it's almost an exact reciprocal slide here. So the number of families who were up by or before 6:30 in the morning was 30% last year, and after 6:30 was 70%. And then this year, it's the flip, right? So 68% are up by or before 6:30, and 32% were after 6:30 in the morning. And I can tell you also that the time range for this year, they were waking up between 5:45 and 7:15 in the morning. And again, we mentioned bedtimes range from 6:30 to 10:30 at night. Next slide. This is the one where we're talking about evidence that the circadian rhythms are misaligned, because, and I apologize for the font, the kids who woke up naturally before, was 40% last year. Kids who woke up on their own now, it's 20%. So you do have some families who say, my kids are always up early, this is great, and we did have a couple of families who said that. But they're only, 20% of the kids who are able to just start that day at that early time. So the green wedge is kids who are able to wake up with the alarm only. And then the red wedge is the alarm plus the parent. And then this purple is the parent solely. So 53% was parent, 5% alarm plus parent, 2% alarm only. Here we have 68% required the parent, 7% required the parent plus the alarm. 5% were able to wake up with just their alarm. Next slide, please. Okay, this is one where it wasn't significant, but I still wanted to call your attention to it. So the eat at home percentage only dropped slightly. It went from 84 to 80%. But the parents seem to report this more. And so I don't know if any parents were skewed either in how they answered the multiple choice question versus their comments. Because a lot of parents said, it's not fair that my child doesn't get to eat breakfast in the morning, or they're running out the door and trying to feed them. We had a parent who also mentioned that their child's hygiene, they weren't brushing their teeth in the morning anymore because they were running out the door. So the percentage that eat at school has dropped from 9% to 5%, the red wedge. Eating on the go increased from 4 to 7%. Skipping breakfast increased from 3% to 8%. These aren't huge numbers and huge percentages, but it is something that also indicates that that morning time is just really pressed for these families. Next slide, please. So this morning chaos is something in the literature that they talk about with middle school and high school kids, supporting why they wanted the later start times for them. Breakfast and nutrition, it is important to consider, even if it's a small percentage of kids who have the shift, that is still, we don't know how that multiplies in the community when you have thousands of kids in your district. And the next slide will tell you more about the teachers reports, but we are seeing kind of carryover of this fatigue in the youngest kids. And then the kids are doing more activities this year than they did last year. So that actually significantly increased. So they're trying to fit in more at the end of the day, but then that creates kind of this evening rush for them where they have to hurry up, take a bath, take a shower, eat dinner, and they're skimping on that parent-child interaction time, or it's more stressful. The other thing I wanted to comment on, we did have parents comment on their own sleep patterns. I don't have that data for you today, but we did have many parents mention that they didn't think they could get any less sleep until this time change happened. And when you think of just overall wellness, if the parent is fatigued and stressed, that carries into their relationship, affects the child, and then the child brings that energy with them to school and may have disrupted sleep, et cetera. So there can be this kind of pattern that we don't want to get into. So next slide, please. The teachers, we had 39 teachers respond last year, 48 this year. Where you see not applicable, we didn't have the item last year, we had it for this year. You are seeing a shift in teachers, noticing more signs of fatigue during school as well. So whereas how often are your students ready to start school? More than half the time, we had 100% last year. 83% said more than half the time this year. 15% said either less than half the time or never. How often did they exhibit signs of fatigue was not a question last year. This year, 65% said often, very often. I did have one teacher tell me she sees the kids in the afternoon, and she said it's more like babysitting because they are so tired that they're just not focused in attention and attending to them. In the past week, they were engaged in discussions, dropped about 10%, but not horrible. How often have you seen students fall asleep? 18% occasionally before, 82% rarely, never. Now it's 29% occasionally or even often versus 71% rarely or never. Whether or not sleep is a problem for students at the school, in their opinion, 46% somewhat or very true last year, 54% this year. And then this is where, like, when we were talking about, did the teachers like the change? We had about an equal split of liked it, didn't like it, or felt neutral about it, or just didn't want to say. And then how the earlier start times extended their day, 69% said the earlier start time extended their day. And they are often doing that extra planning work outside of their contracted time.
I will point out that we didn't ask that question last year, and the contract changed between one
Yes,
year, and
and
we did extend.
I was going to
the
say,
day as part of it.
I just
So
found that
that's-
out last week.
Yeah, so
makes
that
sense too.
use that a little bit too, which may explain why 69% somewhat agreed or agreed, because it did, but that's by our contract, not because of the
Yeah.
timing.
I will say from the qualitative comments, the biggest comments were the planning time, the time with their other collaborators. And then that, just that morning prep time before school starts because it's so early. There are obviously many parents in our teacher pool. And some of them commented that they have to be at school so early, they can't make sure their child gets on their school bus. But we had others that said, it's great because I can be home now to help them with their homework and make dinner. So. Yeah. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think from the sleep perspective, it's okay, it's not great, but it's not horrible, right? So for the high school, middle school students, it's working out well. No one would argue that starting late was a bad idea. I think, well, I take that back. There are some families who disagreed with the change. The research supports the later start time. The kind of other things that we don't tap into right now, but we are going to be looking at the impact on grades. So especially like reading scores, given that parents are reporting that they're not reading as much with their children. So is this actually impacting academics? We wanted to look at attendance to see if tardiness is an issue now versus last year. The issues with behavior regulation, that is something that if we ask questions again in the future, we can tap into a little further. And then if you have poor sleep, you know, there could be issues with obesity later in life, and then the cognitive performance. So those are just things to be aware of. Those aren't necessarily things that came out of the data that we have so far. The response biases, we talked about it, who's motivated to respond on these surveys, what are their reasons for responding or not responding, balancing, you know, when something's significant versus practically affecting families. And I have hundreds of sheets with statistical results if anyone is interested in more specifics on the kind of generalizations that I'm presenting here today. Like I said, we are going to look at attendance, academic data. We also have sociodemographic information on many of these families. The kind of initial pass, there was not a strong connection, but we need to kind of break it down and look at it more closely. We're also going to look at that parent data a little more closely. We have the spring study where we ask a few more social emotional questions. We might add a measure for that. Again, it's only 12 students, but we will get that sleep quality part as well. And then kind of where do I leave you today? So we would recommend, even though we're getting about the right amount of sleep, ideally the kids are not starting before 8 o'clock in the morning, if it's at all possible. Especially because the younger kids need more sleep than the older kids. So that, you know, trying to capture the broad range of bedtimes and wake times for the kids, there may not be the, you know, an ideal situation for everyone, but the data coming out from the older students, generally speaking, the recommendation would be no earlier than 8. In an ideal world, we could have more buses. That's obviously something that parents commented on, either more buses or more routes, because some of the kids are on the bus for a very long time in the morning. So they get on the bus at 7 a.m. and they don't go to school until they get in at 7:40 or 7:45 in the morning. Another thing, I don't know if this would help or not. I didn't even know. So just in terms of people in the district, that breakfast is available if students want it at school. So maybe just awareness that if their children are going out the door without eating breakfast, that they can get it at school and they do have time to eat it in the morning. Or if it's possible to provide breakfast for families. And then the other thing a parent had mentioned was having kids at different sites when they use the Rec Connect aftercare through the school district. So you have Washington families at Washington, and then the Mechanics Grove students go to Dunbar Center. So the parent was saying, if my children were all at Dunbar Center, I have one pickup and then I get home earlier at night versus racing to 2 pickups and then getting home for dinner. And with that thought in mind too, the Rec Connect prices compared to some other private aftercare programs are more reasonable. And so you may actually increase enrollment in the Rec Connect if you're busing kids already from one site to another. So if you maybe were able, either when families wanted that option, or I don't know what the space and contracts are at the park district, but just trying to think, what else can we do so that the families can get home earlier? And then Dr. Crowley really stressed that even though we assume a lot of people know the importance about sleep and routines, there are some families who may not. And I don't know if those families would be motivated to come to other presentations or receive information on it, but just making sure that the context of this is how much sleep your child needs. These are some tips to wind down at the end of the day. Anything that we can do to help educate families so that they succeed in getting the right amount of sleep. And then the other comment that was suggested was perhaps reducing the evening activities at school. So even thinking at Washington, I think reading night is from 6 to 7:15 in the evening. If you have families that need to get their kids to bed at that time, it might lower their attendance at events like that. And also that if the events are only offered in the evening, then just the sense of community may be affected as well. So just to consider, are there other times that families might attend events? And there may not be, they may be working earlier in the afternoon or not want to spend a Saturday. But when it goes into 8 o'clock at night, it's hard for the families to make that shift. Trying to think, the only other comments are families who have younger kids saying that, now they've shifted the time kind of for their whole family, and that just has other effects on their family life, adjusting to the time change. The other comments that were made were not specific to the start time, but the amount of time between location starts. So parents who have to go between Washington and Mechanics Grove, I believe, have 15 minutes. And then I don't know the exact start times off the top of my head, but for Carl Sandburg and the high school, I heard there's just a lot of congestion because the start times are similar. So thinking if there's any ways to break it up a little bit where the parents going to both schools have time to get from one place to the other, or so that traffic is kind of eased up before the other school starts. And Dr. Crowley mentioned that a district she worked with before had actually incentivized parents driving kids to school to reduce the number of bus riders. And so they found a way to give stipends to families. So
car riders.
yeah. The next slide is just the last slide, and a caveat that, middle school and high school, there are recommendations for what time they need to start. A lot of school districts are grappling with the same issue Mundelein is with what's the ideal and optimal time for our elementary students. That is what I've prepared for today. I apologize. I think it probably went way over my time.
No, that's good.
But happy to address any other questions.
Sorry, we peppered you with questions as you went along.
No,
so
it's
thank you.
okay. And I don't know if you guys have gotten feedback outside of the survey. It would be great to just hear what people's anecdotes are.
I think what you brought up is true, though, that the people that speak the loudest are the ones that have the biggest opinions. So sometimes those that don't speak up also speak volumes, because if they were really unhappy or really happy, then they probably would have let us know when we get, gave the opportunity. But it's hard to say because there's so many emails and things, and when you are busy trying to put everyone to bed or get everything,
Yeah.
you may not answer those things.
And
So it's hard to say.
the
but-
kindergartners obviously we don't have a baseline for them, and they came into this with it not being a change, but just being a start time. So we also analyzed the data with kindergarten aside and just, first and second grade, first through fifth, and then all together. Generally, the same findings were there. The results were strongest when you looked at the kids who had data from both data sets. But the trends were still there in the other samples.
Do you know how many people that, or how many students had?
The number of students, I don't have that. I know it was 212 families responded to both years, but I would have to double check our data sheets for the exact number. Oh, wait, you know what? I think I do have it for,
It was in there. I don't remember what it was.
I think on the Washington summary, I think I did have those numbers. Yeah. So in Washington, for essentially it'd be first and second grade, because kindergartners weren't there, there were 67 students who had responded to both. In third through fifth grade, it was 52 students. And then middle school, there was 44 students, and high school, there was 124 students.
Thank you.
You mentioned a spring study. Is there plans to survey again and follow up on these same questions?
So in the springs, so that study, again, that one right now is just the 12 families. And at this time, there's not a plan to extend that study because we don't have the baseline data, but any family that's in that didn't complete the district-wide survey study, they would complete it. But we would be looking at their data in the context of the add-on group of kids. The question of whether or not it's worth surveying again this spring, I think it's an open question if you feel there's any items that you would like to tap into. And also parents did comment that, and again, I'm saying they, and it may be one or two people, but that they don't necessarily want a change mid-year because it's been hard enough to adjust to changes year to year. So I think it's how this information informs the next year.
And I would agree with that. I wouldn't want to change anything mid-year like that, but I asked the question just because Christie had mentioned the timing of the initial survey being at the start of a very big change. And I wonder if it would be any different if we came back at the end of the year and said, now that you've gone the whole year, did you adjust and do you see benefits now?
And realizing that it takes time to analyze that too. I would be interested, even if it was a short kind of, okay, overall, now that maybe you go 9 months, now you put 3/4 of the year, how do you feel about it? Because I would expect it to be hard. A month is not quite enough time for some families to adjust. I mean, it's hard enough to go from summer to back to school and get everyone going, that trying to do that. But I would be curious to know, and I think that your point is good, that the time change is different, but if you were to survey them now at when it's like the earliest time, then again, you're probably going to get some skewed results because you're getting people that are really upset about the time change. But if you do it again towards the end of the year, when we're out of that time change again, so you get a similar feel, okay, now that you've gotten good way for the year.
Yeah.
Generally overall, yes.
And I
because
would
that would help
say
us make decisions.
the district-wide survey, it's sent out from the district, so you guys can have a look at the survey, and if there are particular items, for the purposes of what we were collecting, we're right now so far using the entire survey, but if you have a set of items that you think are high impact for your decision making, then there's no reason another survey can't be launched. And then just a comment, I wanted to clarify for some of the parents that Rush did not tell the school district to change their start times. So we were just offering to help analyze the data. And yes, we agree that there's a lot of literature out there on start times, and we're just aiming to help distill down the data from your district. So thank you.
Thank you.
To conclude, I think one of the things that I would encourage us to do, and one of the things I'd want to be able to work with us on an admin team, is there's a lot of anecdotal data in here, listening to the presentation. I mean, there's some things there that I think some harder data behind it and some opportunities that could exist for us. So when I hear that presentation, the things that come to my mind that I'd like to work with our admin team is, what are some of the barriers? We heard about for families that have students at Washington MG in the drop-off times, also Sanford and the high school groups. What are some opportunities we can change things logistically there? Brought up the suggestions that they had about breakfast. What are we doing to provide opportunities for students to eat first thing when they get in? And this is specifically what we talked about with Washington. Is that an opportunity? One of the bigger ones that was brought up, and to me, what we wanted to try to do is do the best we can to make sure we're putting our students in a position to be successful academically, and it's getting to that sleep amount. I think that was one of the first things we started to talk about. We knew we were looking at making this change. So we know we're right there in the minimum edge. So I think one of the things that was brought up, let's look at, okay, what does it mean if we needed to shift a school 15 minutes one way or another? And is that enough that it changes what could potentially happen sleep-wise? That means for us buses. So one of the things I'd want to do is be able to go back, talk to the principals and say, hey, I'm going to T. How many buses would we need to potentially make this a little bit later without shifting all the other schools, so we're not disrupting all the other school times? So those would be, I think, some of the things that I heard tonight that were more, I'd like to say a little bit more concrete, that we could potentially take action steps to move towards, and then look at that with being able to come back. Because those are just some general things that come out, I think, that we anticipated seeing when we went through this change earlier in the year.
And I don't expect you to answer this tonight, but a question that may also help get to that point too, is I know this year we did something different by combining the bus routes for that. So that, I don't know if that was a positive change, and but that would be something to hear when we get to the point of talking about the transportation stuff later in the year. Again, not expecting an answer tonight on.
I don't know if that was implemented exactly as it was said that it would be implemented. There were parents, and even my own children, when we got the bus schedule, said it was not the case that their buses, they were on the same buses. And so I don't know if that was something other than.
Sure, and those are the things that I knew there were changes implemented, but we don't know the minutia of the details sometimes of how that works. But I would be curious to find out how that went, you know, in the end, because that would also impact, because that's maybe somewhere we can tweak a change to make it a little bit more, you know, beneficial for across the board.
Yep. Agreed. Look at that too. We did get some of the emails that some of it didn't end up happening with our families in that scenario. I think the idea of looking at potentially incentives, if we do have incentives for families that would want to say they'll commit to driving their children to school every day, something we could do. And I like the idea. I mean, it's something I can certainly reach out to the park district and say, here's something here for our families. What are opportunities for having all of the after school programming go to Dunbar or vice versa? I don't know what logistics would be for them, but that's a simple ask, right? And we've always had a good partnership. So I think there's some.
And as
things
a
that we-
parent who used to have two kids or multiple times, different people at different schools, no longer an issue, but that would be a huge change for those that have a Washington and an MG student, because you have to leave work early in order to get to everywhere in time. That does then impact your evening and already put stress all over the place.
So. Cole, want you to know how much we appreciate you. Because it is a lot.
And I apologize that the report, when you started the meeting about reading the reports, I didn't get everything out to you guys right away.
It's okay, it's a lot. And I think for us as a district, right, to me, when we're going through this, let's just remember, we went through this knowing that we might have to look at some things. And I think we need to value what we're getting for information. And because it's being provided to us, it's not as many as we'd like, but hopefully over time we'll still get more. And hopefully we can be a district or kind of leading what to best do for younger students, because there isn't a lot of data in this area. So as we continue to look at it and make some adjustments, and hopefully we can give other guidance for other districts as we move along. Okay. All right, we have two more items in my section. Christie, you and I are teaming up on this one. So this is the second reading for Press Plus 110. Last time we talked, it's really about, we just needed to answer one question from a board perspective, and it's Board Policy 5250 about leave of absence. And our response is no, we do not require our staff to be vaccinated for COVID.
No, it's does the board require fully vaccinated employees to participate in a COVID-19 testing program?
Right.
So the answer, either way, I still no. But we don't even have a testing program anymore, so. Also, but if we ever, hopefully do not have to ever initiate one again, then our policy does not require us to do that.
Yep.
And that's the answer to the question, which is the default IASB thing. So from my perspective, going through this, since this is our second reading, we read the first time. I didn't hear anybody having strong feelings or complaints about what IASB was putting forth and recommending to us. And I know we've all had a chance to read all of it. I will fall on the sword and say, I did not get a chance to fully implement our prior comments into that so that we can incorporate those changes within this in time to get it out to everybody to look at. So I would ask that that part we table for the next one, but that we still adopt this press policy 110 as recommended from the IASB, because I think all of the changes align with what we've discussed, and that we can do a deeper dive to some of the comments, since we are doing a monthly reading of the stuff in order to do that, but I just haven't.
Can do, thank you. Next topic then is regards to the D75 strategic plan. So I will hand it over to Ray.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so just in the way of background and kind of a refresher. We put a committee together, we started in November. Reviewing and going over and talking about creating a mission statement, vision statement, and value statement. And it was important that we establish that, and it was important that we put that in place, because it becomes the foundation that everything else that we do from this point on builds off of. So if you'll recall, at the last meeting, we went through and talked about the mission statement, we talked about the vision statement, and we talked about the value statement. And there were some changes that were suggested that we made and that we put it in there. So that's one of the things that we need to do tonight. It's on the agenda for a vote to approve that. And the next thing that we're bringing before the board is the goals. So these were sent out in the board package, so I hope everybody had a chance to kind of look at it and review it. But to give you the background on what we did and how we got here. In the value statement, there's 7 values that are listed. And we numbered them 1 through 7. Because if you look at this sheet that has the values and the goals, it talks about the value and it gives a definition of what those values mean. And based on what those values mean is what created the goals. So if you look at the top, on the first one, it's got placing students' needs first, which is the first value. Sustaining high expectations for all was the 4th value, and focusing on the future was the 6th value. So the reason they're clumped together like that is because there's consistency in what those values are, what they mean, and therefore the goals that are created as a result of that are also consistent. And then the next, second one was celebrating our diversity and promoting equity. That's number 2 and 3, and then maintaining a collaborative culture is 6, and ensuring fiscal responsibility is 7. So one of the other things that we developed for the website, which gives, I think that's in your package, this is kind of what it looks like. So Emily, oh, there it is. So Emily
created this snapshot, if you will. And that's what we're calling it. So is what this snapshot does is it gives the public, it gives the community an understanding of what we as a board have done in terms of the mission, the vision, what our values are, what our goals are. And they now are aware of what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to accomplish it. So Emily, I don't know if you want to kind of jump in and just kind of give a real quick overview of this.
Sure, so, what Ray had shown previously and on a, you know, where we have all of the goals listed out, we just wanted obviously more condensed and easier to look at version, so. The intent is that, you know, it's updated every year, so that, you know, if the goals are changing or if the goals have been met and we need to add something else, then we would just, yeah, simply update it and upload it to the website.
So in the way of background, the committee, which was myself, Eric and Emily, had assistance from Jamie, Sarah, and Dr. Myers as we discussed this and look forward to where we were going. And we thought it was important to have Jamie and Sarah involved while we were doing this, because the next phase of this is the action plan. So what we have to do is approve. And we approved last month the mission, vision, and value statement. Tonight, if we approve the goals, then we need to meet with the administrative staff and talk to them about what the goals are and get, if we need input from them, dialogue with them so they understand what we're thinking, where we're trying to go. And then they can start their action plan. So we're all on the same page, so that we all know where we're going, and we all know how we're gonna get there. So, with that being said, I don't know if there's any questions or.
Can I ask a clarifying question to make sure I understand? First of all, I didn't see the snapshot in the packet. I see the previous one, so I like seeing that because I think that this does help. For those visual learners like myself, see it a little bit better and understand. I see that it's the same information that's on the one that was in the packet. With the exception of, for some reason, the one on the packet, I was gonna ask, what do these letters on the side mean? But for some reason, only some of the letters are showing up in that right-hand column. However, the one up on the screen looks beautiful, and I can actually read the words on the side,
Yeah.
where otherwise it just said TYSL, and I was like, what does that stand for? What does that mean? But now I understand. So that was just a formatting thing.
Yeah.
But I like the way that works, but just for me to understand clarification, because you just said we would be approving, or you're asking to approve the strategic plan, which includes the goals, but then you said you'd meet with the district to develop the goals. I think to explain the goals.
Yeah.
Okay. That,
Right, there's a dialogue with
understand.
the administration,
So they can develop the action plan.
right,
Yeah.
based on our goals and
Yeah.
based on what we put in place.
Okay, I just misunderstood because I was confused going, well, aren't we approving the goals? But now I understand. I think I misunderstood, but I like what you.
Well, I might have not
That's
said
okay.
it.
Like I said, I didn't understand some of this process, so I'm asking questions to make sure I get it. So I do like what you're putting forth. Thank you.
Is there any, you know, after saying that it's approved and that, and we get this, and you meet with the administrative staff, a timeline as to when we'd like to have the action plan in place?
I think some of that would be sorted out when we meet with the administration. So that, with this dialogue and the establishment of the action plan. Because that is kind of the roadmap that they're gonna follow. And it also gives us, because in our previous conversations about where we as a board are going and what some of the obligations are, this gives us an ability then to kind of monitor what's happening. If things aren't working, we have an opportunity to modify them, change them, tweak them. So that we continue to be on the same page, but we continue to be making progress. And we continue to be meeting the goals. And it's important that I emphasize too, when we were having these discussions and creating these goals. You know, they have to be attainable. And we
Measurable.
agree that they are clearly attainable. And it's not like we're putting some measure of burden on the administration, which ultimately will be on us as well. That we're gonna be able to continue to move forward. And the other important piece of that is, as we put this up, the community now has the ability, because that's one of the next steps that we have to do, is get involved, if you will, or reacquaint ourselves with the community. And these are some steps that tell the community what we're doing, what we're working on, where we are going. And important too, how we're gonna get there. And we're getting there as a working together team with the board and the administration.
I think Chrissy made a good point, you know, you mentioned attainable, but I think measurable has to be coinciding with that attainable, so that
Absolutely.
that we know that we are
Yeah.
attaining.
Yes. Yeah, they have to be measurable and attainable.
And I think that's part of one of the school board
Yeah.
codes that you read to us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree.
Al, to your point on the timing of it, and as far as like deadlines go, I think working with the administration is gonna be really important to get their feedback on that. Cause I really don't feel like we reinvented the wheel here, and I think when we do sit down with them, we may find that a lot of these things are already in progress, and they'll be able to give us some feedback on when they can be met, or, you know, what the plans are for meeting that.
So then let me take one step back. How soon would you plan on meeting with the administration? Pending approval?
Yeah.
Tomorrow?
We were, there has to be some flexibility, and the reason that I say that there's flexibility is because there's things that are, we're gonna be dealing with, like next month, we start talking about budget and those kinds of things. So, it's gonna kind of depend on what that meeting next month would look like, you know, if T says, you know, we're doing this, this and this, and then we might put it off another month.
Mhm.
But still, I think we're gonna give them the information through Dr. Myers, so that they at least have an opportunity to start to look at it and start to talk about it, so that there's some groundwork already in place.
This is
when
probably
we
not gonna
do
be just one meeting. I imagine this is
Well-
already a conversation and it's going through multiple, you know, in order to get to that point, but yeah. And reading through these, we all know the progress we have made in getting some of the feedback and the data, and the fact that we have cycles where we can know kind of what to expect at each meeting and what's gonna happen. Already, there's improvement versus where, and data, and how we collect data, and how we trend data, and how we keep that.
Right.
A lot of that, you know, a lot of these things have already been starting to be implemented, so it's not as though we're putting out brand new things that we have to give Dr. Martin 30 days to turn it around and start going, you know, I mean, it's
But
gonna be
it's
a conversation.
important that we, and you're right, because those are part of our conversation, that we identify those. But we want to make sure they don't fall off,
Correct.
and that if there's some, as we look at some data that we have, is there something we can do to enhance it? Is there something else that we might want to ask for? Or if this is not working and it's a waste of time, then why do we keep wasting time? Let's modify it and move on. So there's a lot of, I agree with what you're saying, a lot of discussion about that.
And once we get to that point, which again, it'll be a little bit of a transition to get into figuring out what that action plan is and then putting into place.
Right.
I heard you guys say that you envision this being reviewed annually. I guess we have to discuss when in our board calendar do we envision that annual review taking place so that we're able to implement changes in time for whatever, like if we wanted to change some of the goals, and this doesn't have to be decided tonight, this is just a discussion tonight, because we've got to decide where we strategically plan that within the board calendar so that we make the most effective use of it. Because we don't want to wait a year in order to implement a change if everything, is already in order for the next year.
And some of those discussions will be with the administration.
Correct.
Because
why I bring it
their
up.
input as well. If we're saying, well, we're gonna do this in June, and they're like, well, we're right in the middle of
Right.
this. So
And that puts them already
timeline
behind the
it's gonna be critical to how successful we become with this.
But I like the fact that the piece up there had it, with this is the 2023-24, so that we're.
Yeah.
Putting a time frame on it so that we
Right.
can say, well, this is when we review it, when we get to that point, and. We look at it then for the next year and can update it so that it's less likely for us to. Not take a look at it and not
Right.
update it, and it keeps us.
And
Accountable to
that's
ourselves.
why it's important to have that on it,
I agree.
because if we're in 2025 and it's saying this,
Then we're not doing our job.
exactly.
Okay. Thank you for your work on this. This looks, all three of you, this looks like a lot of.
Thank you.
Well, like I say, Jamie and Sarah and Dr. Myers were at all
And
the
thank you.
meetings with us, and their input was invaluable. I mean, it really gave us that other perspective as we were moving through this, so it turned out very good.
You good?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, next on the agenda is the representative updates. First one is the STEAM Foundation.
They just put out the information for the STEAM camps that's coming up, so that's, it used to be Saturday Scholars, then Saturday Steamers, and it got pushed back a little bit in this, usually in the past. When we could offer it, years ago, it was offered a little earlier in the winter, so that it was January to March. I'm going to be interested to see how this works out and how the participation is impacted by that, because I will say in my family, looking at the dates that it's offered, it exactly overlaps with basketball and a lot of other things, so we're not gonna be able to participate, much to my kids' dismay, but because I don't wanna sign up for something they're gonna have to miss every other week, because of things. So I'm hoping that that people find value in it and do it, and that doesn't impact it. But that'll be interesting to do, but it's exciting that we're able to redo it again and bring it back, because the last couple of years, that's something that's been missing. And I know that they're planning, already doing the stuff together to start planning for the summer STEAM camps that they do. In combination with the high school, and to do that, so that's exciting for people to think ahead for, and to do that. We're planning our next. The pizza throwdown will be the spring activity that'll be coming up. I don't remember offhand when that date is, but I'll get that to you as it gets closer. It's not out yet. So exciting things happening. I think they're looking to try to do but I don't know the updates on that, and I had an orientation meeting at the high school for another child, so I didn't attend the last meeting the other night, with the, trying to do I can't remember what they called it last year, but the kids who got to do like the projects and they put them out here.
The capstone project
Yeah.
they did for, I know what you're talking.
Where the kids got to apply for a mini grant, and then they worked through kind of like a science fair project, but with some oversight. with some people. Yeah, and then before the meeting, they were able to put them out here and did that. So they're trying to do something like that again. I don't have and they're trying to tweak it from last year, since last year was the first time doing that. So I know they're trying to do that. I don't know the exact updates on that, but I'm sure when it comes out, I can update it for the next. But I know the STEAM camps were the big thing that's going on now, since those just opened up registration. And I know, I saw that, I haven't checked the folder to know if it came home at school yet, but I know that the links went out and on the PTO site and the It's been shared a bunch of places and stuff, so I know it's starting to trickle out there.
Thank you. Next up, CEDO.
Okay, I've mentioned in the past couple meetings that CEDO's been interested in purchasing Fairhaven School. And it looks like they are gonna go ahead and put that to a vote on Thursday of this week with their executive board. I think
It's been renting right now.
they've been leasing it for the past few years, so they're interested in purchasing it. I do believe that comes with a financial burden to us. Or not.
So we got a clarification. So they did meet with us, so they are gonna end up paying for that out of their fund balance. So there wouldn't be bonds that they would take out to where the school district would need to be paying for it annually. The incurred costs that would occur over time with our district being part of CEDAW is in the operations and maintenance costs. So they need to replace a roof, replace a boiler, bigger costs like that, those do get passed on to the member district. We at least would not have a bond payment on their behalf. Which is good.
So I know that's gonna then come to the governing board on March, and so. Guess I'll just look for your feedback if. Yeah, okay.
District 76 will be happy.
Just let me know if anything changes.
Thank you. And last one is Community Outreach Village Liaison.
No report.
Okay, thank you. All right, next on the agenda is the consent agenda. If there is any item that a board member would like removed or tabled for further discussion, now's the time to communicate that. I think we're good, yes? Okay. I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented in the board packet.
Second. Okay, Holly,
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
Carl,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Pelletier.
Aye.
Gallegos
Aye.
and Rose.
Hi.
Okay, next up are the board action items. The first one is the resolution for the general obligation limited school bonds. I move that the Board of Education of Mundaline Elementary School District 75 accept the recommendation to adopt the resolution providing for the issue of not to exceed 4.5 million general obligation limited school bonds of the school district for the purpose of creating the working cap fund, providing for the levy of a direct annual tax to pay the principal and interest on said bonds, and authorizing the sale of said bonds to the purchaser thereof.
Second.
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly,
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Gallegos,
Aye.
Pelletier.
Aye.
Rose,
Hi.
Hitzke.
Aye.
Carl.
Aye.
Next is the intergovernmental agreement for the long-term substitute. I move that the Board of Education of Mundaline Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve an intergovernmental agreement with Fremont School District 79 to share the services of a long-term substitute teacher as presented.
Second.
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly,
Aye.
Pelletier.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Carl
Aye.
and Rose.
Hi.
Next is the memo of understanding for the school board leadership. I move that the Board of Education of Mundaline Elementary School District 75 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the memorandum of understanding with Mundaline Elementary Education Association for a recommended change to update the stipend allocated for the summer school coordinator to $5,400 and the summer school leader to $4,400 in the 2022 through 2026 NIA contract.
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
Carl,
Aye.
Rose,
Hi.
Fingerhut, aye, Gallegos.
Aye.
And Pelletier.
Want to do this one because you said you were gonna be.
Yep, it's actually all,
Good.
yeah, we were talking about adding additional things to it, improving that,
Got
so
it, okay.
we're not adding anything to it
Okay, so-
as presented.
Press plus number 110, I move the Board of Education accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the press policy number 110, second and final reading as presented.
Second,
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Gallegos.
Aye.
Pelletier.
Aye.
Rose,
Hi.
Hitzke.
Aye.
And Carl.
Aye.
And last item is the District 75 strategic plan. I move the Board of Education of Mundaline Elementary School District 75 accept the recommendation to approve the District 75 strategic plan as presented.
Second.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Holly.
Aye.
Gallegos.
Aye.
Hitzke.
Aye.
Carl.
Aye.
Fingerhut, aye, Pelletier.
Aye.
And Rose.
Hi.
Okay, we have an executive session scheduled on the agenda but the only thing on the agenda is the minutes from the last meeting. Does anyone have any questions about that we need to go into session for? Seeing none, we will move on. Next one is President's prerogative. As always, does anyone have any agenda items they would like to add to the agendas for future meetings?
Only what I guess I talked about tonight was eventually I would like to speak something about that transportation bus change that we did, or that we talked. That we did somehow this year. I would like, I guess, to hear how that went and whether we're anticipating doing that in the future or tweaking it again or not doing that, so.
Anyone else?
I'm also still interested in talking about ways to celebrate our students. You know, we briefly mentioned that at the last meeting. You know, whether it's inviting them in here every once in a while or just doing something, but I don't have that answer right now. I just wanted to put it out there. I'll continue thinking about it as well.
And then just as a. I noticed we don't have on at least the sheet here to approve the minutes from the executive meeting, even though we didn't go into session, but if we're approving that, wouldn't that need to be an action item?
We didn't have executive session last.
Well, there you go. That would be why there were no minutes from that. So we certainly have no, okay, good. Efficient are we?
One item I have for President's prior, just a friendly reminder. So on February 2nd, Kevin and Emily had signed up to be at the Hawthorne District Office 73 for a joint meeting with the elementary districts and high school board members. So 73, 76, 79, 120, 75 are all sending 2 board representatives. And what's going to take place is a presentation on how all of our school districts are working together on 2 main areas. One you heard tonight, Jill shared with you about the Aspire program, because they're also interested in what we're doing. And then the other one is going to be, oh my gosh, it's drew a blank, our CEDAW plan for how we're working together primarily on a K-8 level, make sure we're addressing our needs for all of our students that have IEPs. So they'll be getting that report, and then after that February 2nd date, then Emily and Kevin will be able to share with the rest of you board members at our February meeting, what took place at that meeting. And that is February 2nd, and it starts at 8 o'clock.
Anyone have anything else for the good of the group? Happy New Year officially to everyone. Although it's almost February, so there you go. Okay, anyone have anything else? Otherwise, there is no further business for us tonight. So I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned.